This whole thing is a political struggle. It's a political struggle, not a judicial controversy. And they demanded the firing of Deri without any basis in the law. Think about it, because symbolically this is it. The court thinks that it can overrule the public's democratic choice, not on the basis of law, but on the basis of reasonableness.
Welcome back to the Rosenberg Report as we examine this ferocious effort by the Israeli left to bring down Benjamin Netanyahu and his government and to prevent them from reforming the Israeli legal system. Tonight, All Israel News senior correspondent Tal Heinrich helps us look at both sides of the story, beginning with those who believe that Israel's legal system is not only unfair, but unjust.
When Benjamin Netanyahu delivered his re-election speech on the night of November 1st, his supporters chanted repeatedly one word, Meshilut, which translates in English as governance. They want to see Israel's right-wing government carrying out the right-wing agenda it has been elected for. But for years, they say, the country's left-leaning Supreme Court has blocked that agenda. Now, Israel's Justice Minister Yariv Levin, a close Netanyahu ally, has introduced legislation that includes a sweeping set of legal reforms.
We go to the polls, vote, and time after time, people we did not elect decide for us. Many look up to the judiciary, but their voices are not heard. This is not democracy.
Netanyahu and Levin argue the Supreme Court's authority is overreaching and disproportionate because it routinely overturns or limits laws passed by the parliament that it considers as unreasonable or unconstitutional. But Netanyahu, Levin, and many other Israelis ask, how can legislation be unconstitutional in a country that doesn't actually have a constitution? Professor Gadi Taub is an Israeli historian and one of the leading political commentators who believes the High Court is grossly out of bounds and in desperate need of reform. Let's get right to it. What is the problem with the current judicial system in Israel, the way you see it, the way Netanyahu's government sees it? Why is there so little public trust in the country's Supreme Court?
Political power from electoral branches of government to appointed branches of government, that is, to the bureaucracy and above all to the Supreme Court. Currently, there is no limit to the Supreme Court's power. There is nothing that the court sees to be outside its purview, and it thinks it has the final decision on everything, including not just striking down legislation, but also exercising judicial review. So imagine the Supreme Court in America striking down Article 2 of the Constitution, and you'll begin to see how radical this is.
The most dramatic change that Netanyahu and Levin are proposing is an override clause that would allow a simple majority in the Knesset, Israel's parliament, to re-vote on and then reenact any law struck down by the High Court. Israeli opposition leader Yair Lapid says this would crush Israeli democracy and calls the reform a political coup.
What you see here today is a demonstration in support of the country. This is a demonstration for the country. People who love the country have come here today to defend its democracy.
The fact that they are hiding behind the slogans that they are protecting democracy is the exact opposite of the truth. This reform is about to end the juristocracy, the rule of judges, the oligarchy that enables Israel, small upper crust of a liberal elite, to hold power. So this is not the end of democracy. It is the end of their tyranny.
Protesters say the reforms would cripple the court's independence and set back minority rights.
That's just preposterous, because this court has not been defending human rights. It has not been defending minorities. It has been defending the minorities that the liberal elite likes. It has been very discriminatory towards the Orthodox, the ultra-Orthodox, and the national religions. When Israel evacuated Gaza, these people, including girls of 14, were arrested without the right of habeas corpus.
But But the bigger protest, says Netanyahu, took place at the ballot box.
2 months ago, a massive demonstration took place in Israel. The mother of all demonstrations. Millions of people took to the streets to vote in the election. One of the main topics they have voted on was a reform in the judicial system.
I want to ask you more specifically about something that happened last week. The Israeli Supreme Court just ordered Prime Minister Netanyahu to fire his deputy, Deri, a minister that Netanyahu wanted to appoint. And the court said that the notion of Deri serving as a government minister is, quote, unreasonable in the extreme. Do you see this case as the Supreme Court protecting the Israeli people from a convicted criminal because Deri has been convicted in the past, or is it an extreme example of judicial overreach?
It is an extreme example of judicial overreach and a demonstration that this whole thing is a political struggle. It's a political struggle, not a judicial controversy. And they demanded the firing of Deri without any basis in the law. Think about it, because symbolically this is it. The court thinks that it can overrule the public's democratic choice, not on the basis of law, but on the basis of reasonableness.
So what should be the role of the Supreme Court, the way you see it, as opposed to how it functions now in a country that doesn't have a constitution?
Well, first of all, the court announced that we do have a constitution. That was part of its usurpation of power. It took our basic laws, as they are called, which had no normative advantage on other laws, until the Supreme Court Chief Justice, Aaron Barak, who is if you combine John Marshall with Earl Warren, you'd still be only at knee heights compared to Barak's hubris. And he declared that he gave us a constitution based on basic laws. For instance, there is a law in Israel that does not allow parties who do not recognize Israel as a Jewish democratic state, or who support racism or support terrorism, run for parliament. There's a party, an Arab party, which the heads of which supported Hezbollah, even in the midst of a war with Israel. And Aaron Barak managed to interpret this away, saying that there was not a critical mass of evidence for their support of terrorism. And people here jokingly said that for Aaron Barak version of critical mass, anything short of coming into the chamber with a bomb would not be considered support for terrorism.
Zooming out of Israel, I know that you see this as a greater issue that also pertains to other Western democracies, where we see this tension between nationalism and globalism. If you can expand.
Yeah, sure. And I think this should be very familiar to American viewers and listeners, because in the United States too, there is a globalist elite which is trying to undermine the nation states in various ways by submitting it to subduing before international organizations like the World Health Organizations, the UN, by allowing limitless immigration, and also by expanding judiciaries. And this is happening all over the Western world, where these elites are trying to pull power out of electoral politics and deposit it in the bureaucracy, in the administrative state, in appointed judiciaries, and in international bodies